Your customers' and employees' identities are your responsibility to keep safe. But who is helping you stay safe from identity-based threats? Identity is the key to getting security right. And with the right identity partner, so much more is possible for your business than you thought. From strengthening cybersecurity, to increasing revenue, to reducing inefficiencies and costs, Okta unlocks growth and new possibilities for its customers. Go to securityweekly.com/Okta to learn more about Okta and the company's commitment to leading the fight against identity attacks. Let's talk about something that's becoming increasingly important for enterprise companies worldwide: cyber risk management. Traditionally, cyber risk has been managed manually in silos, separate from the business's core operations. The future is about getting real-time risk insights benchmarked against your industry peers through automation. And CyberSaint's CyberStrong platform is leading the charge. CyberStrong is not just another point solution. It's a revolutionary platform. It's a quantified top-down risk approach where your unique cyber risks inform C-suite decision-making to identify your top 5 cyber risks and the controls to mitigate them. Sign up for your free cyber risk analysis by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersaint. Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. That's the number 1 password. Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. All right, gentlemen, we're going to get into the articles, and we're going in hot on this first article. Jason, I said when we were getting ready to come on, I'm like, if you're going to publish an article about CISOs, you better be prepared for them to show up on this show. And
That's
this
right.
one, and this is a really interesting one. I'm reading this, and I'm like, oh. Do I really want to start with enforcing compliance and audit readiness as a CISO?
Absolutely not. and you know me and my reordering kind of like OCD, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I took a look at this article, and honestly, I start with enforce compliance and audit readiness. Definitely not. I mean, at the end of the day, and you guys can give me a feedback.
That's like number 42, Jason.
It's, yeah, well, maybe 37, but but at the end of it, make risk management and security resonate to the business, right? We know we need to be focused on risk management. Hey, know where all your sensitive data is and how to secure it, and then have a little bit of observability and visibility into what that's like. The trust your data section, I was so confused at what the point was behind that one bullet. They talked about customer trust is very important. Yep, we know that, and it's rooted in your, data security. But then it goes off to talk about how, automated response workflows and threat detection are super important as well. So I threw that one away and I put it aside. Maybe that's, number 43, Ben. But yeah, I took enforced compliance and audit readiness, kind of pushed it way down, because that should all just be outcome of your security program. That should be outcome of your risk management program, right?
And the know where all your sensitive data is, isn't that really just like for the whole rest of the organization? Like, that's not really the job of the CISO. Like, he's supposed to verify and understand that, but like having the inventory of your data and what it's used for, geez, maybe when you're making the product, document that. Document it well.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about this. It's the say easy, do hard, right? The asset management. Well, guess what? Data is an asset. And it's something that you have to manage and have visibility into, know where it's at, classify it. And hey, if the CISO has to kind of be that person who can connect the dots or get stakeholders involved and really be that person who can make it happen, sure, absolutely, and influence it 100%. But yeah,
I think we're on the same page there. But I'm just trying to call out that that doesn't become like the mandate of the CISO to go down and track all the data down. Like, it's not his data, right? It's your data. understand it well and be able to deliver that over as like an output when he asks, like, hey, what is your data? What is it being used for? How do you account for it? What are you doing to secure it? Like, all that's a package that you should be handing over, and the CISO should just be validating that you're doing that correctly. You haven't missed classifications, right? Or, you know, you haven't missed something that you weren't aware of. But like, it's not a free for all of like, yeah, I don't care, I'm just getting everything I can data wise, and it's your problem now. Like, that's what it's been, and it's a pain in the butt. Like, just
100% agreed, right? But unfortunately, in most cultures, when you ask that question, Ben, you're going to get the
blank stare.
I don't know where it is. I don't know what it's classified. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And having that strong culture is what's important, because now you as the CISO will have the CEO who has your back, and then go to all the other business units and say, you want to know what? You own this. This is something that you need to provide back to the organization, right? So we can manage risk. So that's the importance of the culture.
I think this tracks with some of the other articles, but like the underlying thing is, you don't understand what a CISO is and what its role is within the organization if this is your answer 100%. To the CISO.
See, the problem with an article like this, right, is they're trying to take a data approach, put it into a CISO context, and it's like, wait a minute, it doesn't quite fit. I mean, parts of it fit, but then parts of it are like, it's very data centric in this particular case. And the question is, well, who owns the data? Well, the business kind of owns the data, right? Okay, maybe I have to be the guardian of the data, but the business should be telling me what's critical, what's not critical. I should be working with them to come up with a strategy on how to protect that data. That means things like compliance become outcomes. They're not like the number one thing on the list. Like it's when you take a very specific slant of the CISO role and you try to shove it into the CISO role, it gets a little messy, people. Like, it just does. And this is an example of it, which is why I pulled this article in.
Yeah. And
we're trying to cover it.
We're talking about this because we need to break down the misconceptions of the CISO.
Yes.
We have to. And this is our job. And you want to know what, guys? 3 years from now, the industry will be saying what we're saying, because we've been seeing it happen. episode
6 years and going, Jason. Holy mackerel.
Someday they'll see it. I'm telling you.
Someday. Yeah.
And even that last one, like, trust your data, I'd replace trust with question. Question your data.
I mean,
it's integrity, security,
if you read what's under that paragraph, it was just confusing as hell.
Yeah.
To be completely honest with you.
It's because they're trying to shove this data-centric message into the role of the CISO as the guardian of data. It doesn't quite fit, and this is what happens when you do that. Yeah. So that it's a perfect segue into why CISOs are stepping away and what the future holds. Now, we've talked about this a lot on this show. So nothing really surprising in this article, but then I look at, what does the future look like? And we've talked about reimagining the CISO role. We covered an article last week, remember, where they basically wanted to go back to the old way that it was under a CIO, CTO, CISO structure, right? And we're like, nope, that's not the direction.
Please stop now. Pump the brakes on that, please.
Right. But there are ways to reimagine the role of the CISO in a more strategic, business-focused role. They don't get into the specifics here. The problem is, they say reimagine the CISO role, but then don't get into any of the specifics about what does that evolving role look like.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they obviously come up with some good statistics and points as to the why we're starting to see CISOs step away, right? I mean, the biggest one that they had in there is they're not supported at the executive level, right? They're just not getting the support. And maybe, Ben, to the point of the last article, they don't understand what the CISO is supposed to do within an organization. And that can be frustrating as hell.
To the CISO, and then to everybody else when he wants to leave, right? Or when he figures out that, this isn't the right thing. And they're questioning, like, well, why aren't we getting what we thought? Why isn't he just a yes man? And why isn't he just signing the compliance forms, right? Like, because you can't just sign them, especially with all the liability and issues right now. Like, there's a lot of landmines out there.
Yeah.
And I think people are getting tired of getting blown up by them.
100% agreed. And I mean, the bottom section of this article, they start to go through kind of some of the items that I guess the author thinks that are happening. But, my bullet point in my OneNote here is, are we? Question mark, question mark, question mark. And are we shifting from purely reactive to the role becoming a strategic business enabler? I don't know. Right? Are we? Yeah. Are most organizations doing that? No, I don't think so. Are we beginning to share cybersecurity responsibilities across leadership roles? See previous article. Right?
Like every one of these bullet points is like why people are frustrated. It's not like a reason why it's getting better, right? AI and automation, like that's not helping to alleviate the workload on the CISO. It's making it more complex.
Right.
Boardroom recognition. I don't think CISOs are gaining greater visibility at the executive and board levels. Like,
which is why we're seeing.
If anything, it's a frustration that we're not doing that, right?
Exactly. That's all of those, all of those numbers on CISOs stepping away. 64% of CISOs, right? They talk about them that they're having some kind of a satisfaction issue, right? I mean, come on, it's like we're frustrated. The business isn't getting us. They're not allowing us to align to the business and actually do the job that we're hired to do. And this article is written as if we live in nirvana, right? I mean, it's positioned as cybersecurity becomes a top priority, and CISOs are gaining greater visibility at the executive and board level. Are we?
Yeah.
Put 10 question marks after
whenever
that.
Whenever I'm in a new role as a CISO, right, one of the things I do is I sit down with my team. I try to understand what their objectives are, what they've been doing, what the landscape's like. Yep. And then look, how can I help? Like, what can we do to move this better? What are your, because they know the organization, right? But, when that happens, when you come into a new role, like how many people in the CISO role do you know that they said, hey, it was amazing. The CEO came and sat down with me and said, how do you define this role? Like, what do you think we should be doing? Right. Like that doesn't happen, right? Like it's very, very rare. And so I think mostly you're struggling to get the connection and the visibility and the input to the business, right? So I just think fundamentally we need to look at this differently.
Yeah,
we do.
And again, if this were nirvana, all of those statements would be true. But we're not in nirvana now, obviously. Look at the stats.
Yeah, we're not. Definitely not. And so that's why I tapped into this next article, How Good Leaders Become Great by Never Leading Alone. Now think about that for a second, right? We just talked about how we have to have a shared responsibility across the executive team. Instead of looking up, look across, right? And this article talks about you become a great leader by not leading alone. CISOs, if you want to succeed, you are going to have to manage expectations across the executive suite.
Absolutely, 100%. We've talked about this so many times. It's about building those relationships, right? Building those relationships with your colleagues. Because when you're sitting in front of the CEO, you want to make sure you have a team of people behind you who are supporting you. You're not walking in there solo. You're not trying to influence by yourself. There's nothing more influential when you walk into a CISO or into a CEO or a CFO as the CISO, and you have the support of all your other peers for the initiative. That how is the CEO going to say no when my entire executive team is behind this? Yeah. Now that's not always going to happen, but if you start building those relationships and you start building those trust with your colleagues, your peers, folks around the organization, the CEO is going to have to start listening. Have to, because now the entire executive team, the leadership team, you guys are on the same page and you're saying the same thing. You're getting that support.
I would definitely say that's to say easy, do hard.
Oh yeah, it's not. It's very hard. It's extremely hard. It's not easy at all. I mean,
and that takes time. That's not something you get in the first 6 months. Yeah.
A ton of time. I mean, you talk about when you first start as a CISO, your first 18 months is going to be building relationships, building trust. It takes
Which if
time.
you pivot back and look at what's the average tenure, that becomes problematic, right? Because the tenure is not there.
You literally just started building relationships and you're leaving.
Yeah. So I've seen certain companies do rotation strategies, which is really interesting when you think about it from this kind of topic, right? Like when I was doing work at Royal Dutch Shell, the CISO rotated in from another group, eventually rotated out. When you get into large organizations where you have that kind of executive rotation, guess what? There's a level of continuity when it comes to executive relationships, right? That do have an advantage. And I almost think that in some cases, trying to figure out how to bring a CISO up from within the ranks may be a better fit for some organizations than trying to bring somebody from the outside who doesn't know the executive team. Because to your point, right? They come in, no relationships. It's going to take them too much time. And by the time they start to build relationships, they're on to their next role potentially.
No, I agree. I mean, as long as it's the right fit for the job, the right talent for the job and experience for the job, right? If you have someone who grew up within the ranks and they really built out their business acumen and their skills when it comes to, making sure you can align the risk management and the cybersecurity side to the business, speak the language of the business. If you have somebody coming through the ranks who's still speaking technology and still speaking IT, at least when you're speaking at our level, that's not going to be the right fit. They're not going to be able to move the needle, and you're going to backpedal the influence that cyber has within the organization.
Yeah, could.
Got to be the right fit.
Yeah, right.
I agree.
That optimally should be the role of in the right organization, right size, a good deputy, right? Like if you've got a good deputy, that's part of your succession plan.
Right, succession plan, exactly. Start grooming the deputy to have those skills. Yep,
agreed. Next article, how to become the company top cyber talent wants to join. Interesting article. I don't disagree with most of it. I mean, there's some pieces in here that are say easy, do hard, but there are some really interesting ones. And I think the one I keep going back to, I just remember Jim Ralph saying, employees don't want to be retained, they want to be developed. They don't want to be retained, they want to be developed. And I see all these retention discussions in these articles.
One of the bullet points is develop skills within your team, right? That's one of them. And that could be aligned to the build talent pipeline that works as well, because that could be within your organization that you're building out that pipeline. So I mean, the development, absolutely. For me, it's always been that kind of shift left mentality where you're grooming folks within the organization so you can build that pipeline of talent, build it up. But it all starts with way left and partner with a great university, right? Get some great interns, get some folks who can start working within your organization. And you can go from intern to entry level, from entry level to, skills, and then start really developing on them from there.
Yeah, I don't agree with any of that, but I want to pose that they're missing one glaring item on here, and that's give a shit about your security program.
Oh,
right? If when you go in and you find that, oh my God, their culture is here. They actually really care about security. They want to do it right. The people are engaged. They're asked to participate at a business level. If that will resonate within the rest of the team, that when you then want to hire somebody, they will sense that, right? And that becomes the draw. And if you're in marketing and you're joining an organization, you want a company that's really focused on marketing, right? You want to see that there's investment in the organization that you're joining, not just you're being brought in as talent that's easily replaceable.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Go ahead,
Matt.
I was going to say, as a candidate, one of the questions you should ask is, what's the culture like for cybersecurity in the organization, right? Because if that is consistent across executives that you're interviewing with, then there's a good culture. Because if there's not, then it doesn't matter all this other stuff. It probably doesn't matter.
Right. No, it is. It is absolutely the core.
It's not, and you asked it the right way. What's the culture within cyber? Not what's the culture of the organization. Well, we take Fridays off in the summer, and we have beer Thursdays. That's all great, right? But that in your day to day, that's not what matters. What matters is what's the culture of the approach to the organization that I'm joining. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's So it's a good one to point because it is missing out of this article.
Yeah.
And it's an indicator on how to cultivate joy, Matt.
Oh, yes. Oh, look at you. Ben's rolling us right along.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it was a podcast. It was an episode, and I listened to it. And, one of the first things out of the gate they started talking about was, what's the difference between joy and happiness? There's a difference between joy and happiness, right? And when you truly have that innate joy of working within an organization, where you're motivated to help people, you're motivated to help your clients, you're really bought into the culture and the mission and making sure that you're always helping your colleagues move up, that's joy. You can be happy, but having that shared joy of working for an organization is totally different. It's a different level.
It's funny, Jason. I pulled out the exact same section from this podcast, right? The differences between happiness and joy. And it's funny, you went to the same place because you're right. Like in general, I'm happy, right? I'm just a happy person. But when you talk about joy and serving others and how work gets done together, like it's a different spin to it. And then the rest of this is about how to cultivate that joy in your team.
Right. But that's the joy portion of it is the foundation of it all, right? That's the key to the success of all of this. And then it starts talking about, as leaders, you need to be modeling that joy, right? So you need to model the way, like we talk about all the time with leadership roles. You need to be modeling the way. And one of the things that I pulled out that I thought was absolutely outstanding, and I see so many leaders fall victim to this, building that relationship and trust means that you're not always the smartest person or think you're the smartest person in the room, right? Mm-hmm. Some of those leaders that you should truly take a step back and have that wow moment are the ones who are sitting in the corner not saying a word. And the reason why is that they've built a team around them that they trust to lead meetings, lead strategies, and they've modeled the way for them. So now they can sit back and be quiet and speak when in the right moment to support the team. That means they built an outstanding team. And that's the key to leadership.
Kind of like this podcast, guys.
That's right.
Joy doing this podcast.
100%.
Right?
I wake up in the morning and say it's Podcast Monday, and I'm a big smile on my face.
And then he goes to see which articles I put in there for him to reorder. Because that's what
that's his joy. He likes picking it apart.
No.
Don't let him fool you.
The first thing I do is I shed a tear because it's usually Patriots loss that I talk about right out of the gate.
That's true. Yeah.
So I shed a little tear and then I get back right on the joy train.
Yeah, the Browns didn't do well this weekend either, so it's all right.
Right.
Jason,
we had a bye, so thank God I don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right, how leaders can prepare their teams for 2025. Now, when I pulled this article originally, because I pull articles throughout the week, right? So I'm doing my news feeds, I'm checking stocks, I'm doing all kinds of stuff. And when I saw this come across, I tagged it, I threw it into my folder. I didn't realize at the time because the title doesn't talk about AI per se, but what this article is really doing is trying to prepare their teams for 2025 and the uncertainty around artificial intelligence. But there's some good learning points out of it that, you have to learn how to embrace that uncertainty and prepare your teams for it.
I mean, Matt, the big piece that I took out of this is, listen, I think everybody, all of our listeners, we know, we've seen it. 2024 has been disruptive. They call it out as a major upheaval year. Think about everything that's happened. I mean, let's rewind to January 2024. I mean, you're talking inflation, global wars, the insanity of the election, AI being every single topic of every conversation at every conference, news article, newscast. It was a disruptive year. Layoffs. Think about the amount of layoffs that happened in technology and cybersecurity and companies shuttering their doors. It was a disruptive year. So I took this at a little bit of a higher level that no matter what, you need to start looking at 2025 as a year that you need to reboot from the insanity of 2024, right? Not just with AI, but all of this disruption that happened. There was a ton. This was a tough year for businesses, for people, for employees, a tough year.
Yeah, and it started in 23, Jason, as we've talked about, right? I mean, this started in 23, 24 through the elections have been just pure craziness, right?
Absolutely.
Now, maybe things will settle down in 2025. I hope so, right? There might be some changes on the horizon that might be good. And so that's why when I was like, oh, this is AI, but I'm like, you can still learn lessons from this article on, well, what worked last year, right? What do we need to do differently next year? See, Ben's heading to London after this, and Ben's going to have more fun than I am. I'm going to New York City, but it's part of 2025 strategic planning, right? Like what worked in 24, but what didn't? And what do we have to do differently in 25, Jason, to your point, right?
How do we pivot?
Because we've been through this for almost 2 full years now.
Right. Yeah. And that's the key. I mean, you have to be able to set a strategy for that reboot, right? And kind of let go of the things of the past of 2024. January 1st is our ability to kind of flip that switch and say, all right, new year, new goals, new drive, right?
Yeah.
Take a look at it.
And I would say on that note, like, look, I think when you go into, especially coming out at, like you said, it went back to 23 map, and I would say, look, go back to 21 and 22, like coming out of COVID, like it's been a rough little bit of time for a lot of people, right? And even if 24, if generally for your team it was decent, they may be still dealing with the impacts of prior stuff, right? And so I think when you look at 25, like one of the things I've learned is, don't come out of the gate shooting for perfect, right? Come out of the gate shooting for something you can put down as wins, that then you can build on that success throughout the year and hopefully get to the end in a really good state, but you didn't set your team up for kind of disappointment because you missed stuff early and it kind of throws off the tempo of everything, right? That's a really common thing people do. They're like, all right, we're going to go at it because 25 is going to be great. Like, give yourself some grace to get a running start.
Yeah. Because the other thing, right, is getting your team aligned on all of this and setting proper expectations and objectives for the year, right? Because not only do we have to, reset, kind of reboot, Jason, to your point, a little bit for 25, we now have to communicate that to the rest of the teams, get them aligned, and then set, to your point, Ben, proper expectations as we roll into Q1 to Q2 to Q3, because it's not all going to be flip switch January 1. It's going to slow roll, because here's what's going to happen, folks, right? You're not going to get your budgets on Jan 1.
Yeah.
You might get them in Feb, you might get them in March. Until people start to get their budgets and can start to make some of those changes, it's going to take some time in certain areas to ramp up some of these objectives. So Ben, to your point, give yourself a little breathing room on expectations as you roll into the new year.
I 100% agree, but I also look at it from the psychological piece of it, right? And in the psychological piece, I think is a little bit easier to say, you want to know what? New year, new drive, new perspective, let's move. And know that budgets are coming, things are happening, but you want to know what? Let's get prepared to hit the ground running and rip into this year. Right. And really go in strong. That's the key. There's the operational slow roll and expectation slow roll, but there's a psychological switch we can flip and say, you want to know what? Let's go kick the shit out of 2025.
Yep. And if you're a leader nervous about public speaking, here's how to use notes like a pro. This is our last article, by the way, but I brought it in
here
because... How
do you handle this? Because I know you're nervous all the time about speaking.
I know. Look, in the early days, I relied heavily on notes. I did. Like all my slides had notes in them, which is why I pulled this article in. Now, I've actually moved more to a script than notes personally for me, because I've done enough public speaking now that I kind of know what I want to talk about. I kind of know my flow. I have to always build my own slides for a presentation. I can't use anybody else's for this reason. But I used notes heavily in the early days. And so there are some really interesting tips in here for those that are still maybe not comfortable speaking in public, and how to leverage notes. And even it was interesting, like how to go get to your notes, like move towards your notes, pause and breathe, strategically drink water, like so you can actually read your notes and kind of get your thought track back on. It was good tips for people who definitely need 100%. Notes as part of their speaking engagement.
I mean, one of the things I honed in on this article too was it actually talked about, and I had a great public speaker who mentored me for quite a while, and one of the things he always said was, you need to understand when you get hijacked. You need to understand that you're getting hijacked, and it's the fight or flight, right? And what he started talking about was like the lizard brain and how that operates. And, he started really teaching me about the physiological changes that actually happen when you get nervous. Because so many people have the nerves right before they speak. And he started teaching me about, listen, your heart rate goes up. Your blood literally starts moving away from your arms and your legs and your feet and your hands to go try to save your vital organs. So all the blood starts to rush to the middle of your body and your brain, right? So you start to truly get that fight or flight. And that's why you start getting nervous. That's why you start shaking. You need to learn how to control that. And there's techniques to control that, like breathing, like they talked about here, things of that nature. The upfront key is learn how you're getting hijacked, what hijacks you, and how to prevent yourself from, or at least tame the getting hijacked. That's way before your notes, right? You have to learn that ahead of time.
Yeah, there's a lot of tips and tricks. Like I used to lock myself away 2 days before a keynote session and do nothing but practice, right? And just kind of get it ingrained, felt comfortable with it. I wouldn't even see my teams prior to until after I was done, Jason. Like that's what I needed to do. Like, because then I was in a position to control everything around me. And then when it was over, I was like, oh, okay, good. I'm good to go. Right. But not everybody can do that.
I think you got to figure out what works for you, right? You got to know yourself, know how you react to these situations. But I mean, I think it's a good point. Like, I think a lot of people go into these things thinking like, all right, I'm going to map everything out. Like, that's a recipe for disaster, because if that's if you miss something on that, then it like puts you into that fight or flight. Like, oh, I missed it. Like, how do I get back on track? Like, you got to be able to have a flow. You got to be able to slow yourself down, calm down. Like, slow is fast, as we say in a lot of things. Like, this is another thing where slow is fast, right? Like, there's a more natural flow to it in a conversation, and people want to see that you're having a conversation with them, even though you're speaking to them. It's a conversation, right? Like, they're engaging with the nodding of the heads, right? You're engaging with kind of some amount of information you're trying to get out, and you're not just reading off a script. That comes off very dry and poor, right? So, yeah, especially if you're presenting with a smaller group, and there is interaction. Like, to your point, Ben, if you had it all scripted out and somebody interrupted your flow, would you know how to recover? Like, seriously, you have to think about that. Yeah. You have to just kind of know your outline so that if a disruption or a question pops up, you know how to get back on track.
That's right. And they actually gave a couple of different techniques in there. And one of them was really good. You know, if you get off track and you lose your train of thought, stop and pause and say, hey, anybody have any questions on what I've covered so far? And then kind of open it up and give yourself that reset time.
Pause is good. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.